Hello everyone and welcome to a brand new episode of the Sports Aside with your host Alanda Khan. And yes, as you know, we give you information about sports from all across the globe. You guys can surely reach out to us on our social media handle, which is @Indus New Sports. That basically works both for Twitter and for Instagram. But anyways, we'll go to the headlines first. And yes, from the world of football, Alisson Becker's 95th minute header actually managed Liverpool to win against West Brom. And yes, from the world of golf, South Korean KH Lee manages to win Brian Nelson for the first PGA Tour title. And yes, from the world of MotoGP, Australia's Miller actually managed to conquer the rain and win the French MotoGP. And yes, from the world of NBA, Warriors actually managed to win against the Grizzlies 113-101. And yes, those were the headlines, and not to forget that, there's so much happening in terms of the world of football. And as discussed in the headlines, yes, Liverpool actually managed to get that victory 2-1 at the last moment against West Brom. Not only that, there have been major updates with regards to a few matches. We'll surely be discussing all of those with Rob, who's joining us all the way from the UK. Rob, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
Great. So, Rob, we'll start off with the first news of the day, which is surely Alisson Becker's 95th minute goal that actually managed to rescue Liverpool against West Brom on Sunday. So, what's your take on, to begin with, on this particular match?
Well, it was obviously an incredible end to the match, which has saved Liverpool's season in terms of them qualifying, hopefully, for the Champions League. A fantastic bullet header from a goalkeeper, which you don't expect. But I think the bigger question really was about Liverpool's performance going into this game. You expected them to do well, so they scored lots of goals in that match. But they just didn't seem to have the motivation or the ability to really put their opponents to the sword.
Right, but in generally, overall, if we look back into the overall performance of Liverpool, if we look back a few days back, one interesting match that actually took place, obviously, against Manchester United. But now, if for them making these last moves to get there, to be noted, because of the fact they would definitely want to be qualifying for the Champions League. So how do you see them? Are they changing their strategy now? Do you think this was the right time? Because they have been having some major upsets lately in terms of Liverpool as a team.
Yes, I think when they played Manchester United, they were playing the United side who have got one eye on the Europa League final, and that was certainly there, you could see in their selection. But I think with Liverpool, after they got a result, which was a fantastic display at Old Trafford, you really now need to see them move through the gears to kind of see these final three matches out to show that they want that final Champions League place. And it wasn't there in that match, and that was a surprise in itself. And I think that the Alisson goal was fantastic for them. It's a great news story. But overall, I think the performance in these last two games now are going to have to be much higher than they were.
Absolutely. I think now they probably have that strategy, because I think a lot of fans out there have been really upset in terms of performances from the Liverpool end, but then they surely do have a question mark on the fact that Van Dijk is not there, and that's probably one of the major drawbacks that they had. But I think they're surely, slowly and gradually trying to cope up with that situation in terms of making their placement in the Champions League.
Yes, well, the Champions League now is everything to Liverpool. Coming fourth in the Premier League for them after being champions last year and having two or three fantastic seasons would still constitute failure. However, you need to be in that Champions League conversation for next season. If you're not, you lose an incredible amount of profits, you can't attract players, and it really puts your project back to a place where you don't want it to be.
Well, let's hope Liverpool manages to do so. We'll surely want to talk about the next match. Crystal Palace's victory against Aston Villa. That was also an interesting match, obviously. Goal-scoring game, 3-2. So what's your take on that particular match?
A little bit of a dead rubber. I think for Aston Villa now, they are happy where they are in terms of their position for the season. And it's also now with Crystal Palace deciding what they're going to do next season. They will have several players out of contract, so they will have a squad revamp. And there's also a big question over whether Roy Hodgson will be manager of the club next year.
Interesting. But in terms of goal scoring perspective, if we look back into their obviously standing to begin with, Crystal Palace currently is on the number 13th. And if we look back into last week, how actually Fulham is now relegated, West Brom is relegated, Sheffield United is relegated. So how impactful would this be for them as a team in the long run?
I think in the long run, it doesn't really matter. We're at the end of the season now, and I think the teams in mid-table are happy where they are.
Right.
I think what happens here at the end of every campaign is that if a big club plays one of those teams in the bottom half, you generally see good performances from those teams. So the teams that are relegated, you might think they're playing for nothing, but they quite often go out there and play to a high standard because they're relaxed and there's no pressure.
So specifically those teams who are in the mid now, because obviously being the end of the season, it would not be of a bigger contrast or bigger shock to them, because they're definitely on the charts for now. The major teams that are truly working would probably be the first 5 to begin with, if I'm not wrong.
Well, of course, yeah, the teams going for Champions League and also Europa League places, they're the ones still battling for the last couple of games. The teams in mid-table are generally comfortable. There's no additional prize money really for if you move up 1 or 2 places. It's minimal. It's not really what the clubs are after.
Right.
And those teams in mid-table, their main objective every season is obviously to avoid relegation and be there next season.
Interesting. All right, one more match that actually happened. Obviously, Tottenham Hotspur, who actually managed to win against the Wolves 2-0. What's your take on that particular match?
Yeah, well, Spurs obviously chasing Europa League places now. A strange season for them. They were top around Christmas. They were top of the table, and here they are now without their manager. Obviously, Jose Mourinho's left the club, and also a big question mark over what Harry Kane will do next season. There's also the question of whether Son will be at the club in future. So the victory against Wolves was welcomed, and they need to finish in a European place again. They want to be in the Champions League. That isn't going to happen now. But if they're in the Europa League next season, that gives them something to plan for next term.
Right. So is there any possibility for them in terms of victory? Because as you mentioned, I still remember them being on top of the table again with, but now they're lying on the number 6. So do they still have that hope besides Europa League?
Not really. No. When you look at the table now with 2 games to go after this,
right.
They've put themselves in this position themselves, unfortunately, with their displays. Obviously, Harry Kane is still there, so they know that they could finish strongly with the last 2 matches. But for them, it's just about securing now maybe 6th or 7th, getting hold of that Europa League place and making sure that they've got something positive to look forward to next season.
Interesting. So this means that, you know, eventually, as only 2 games are left, so we don't really see major changes with regards to Tottenham's placement now.
Not really. The big kind of question for the Premier League now is who finishes 3rd and 4th. So with Leicester and Chelsea coming up, that's a huge game in terms of the top 4. That will determine which one of those 2 teams possibly slips out of the top 4 right. if Liverpool win their final 2 games. So that's the narrative around the Premier League at the moment.
So Liverpool actually has to face Burnley to begin with, and obviously if they manage to secure that victory, and obviously a victory against Crystal Palace, so they'll definitely go on the higher charts, if I'm not wrong.
Not definitely, but almost definitely. It really does depend on what happens with the other couple of results that will go with them. They need to win, and they need to win well. And I think this is why people thought that they would score a lot of goals against West Brom, and that didn't happen. They need the goal difference just to look after themselves. Yesterday was just 1 additional goal for their goal difference. Right. And it means that they need to have good victories in these last 2 games to guarantee 4th place.
Okay, let's hope. And I think against Manchester United, Liverpool actually performed. I think that probably will add a lot of value to them for now, because, you know, that was one match that, you know, if you remember a few weeks ago, it was scheduled, but things were really, really out of control at the Old Trafford.
Well, I think that's what we all presumed, that a good victory at Old Trafford would propel them forward. But the game against West Brom showed that that isn't really the case. There's still lots of questions to answer in that team. You could see that there's some discourse there that players are not happy at the moment, right. for whatever reason that is. And that is definitely, I think, contributed towards where Liverpool are this season. This is probably one of the worst performances we've ever seen a champion put out there after winning the title. Right. And the fact that they're kind of battling for 4th, there's some luck involved there. because if Chelsea had taken their chances and Leicester had taken their chances earlier in the season, then there would be no chance for Liverpool to get in the Champions League now.
So if we talk about Champions League, and surely we want to talk about the Champions League final that is also scheduled for the 30th. How do you see that development? I still think, because now they've planned on moving it to Portugal. Initially, it was scheduled on 30th, but it was basically meant to happen in Istanbul, if I'm not wrong. But now things have changed because they want the fans out there for that specific final. So how do you see that development in terms of Manchester City? And then we talk about Chelsea.
I think Manchester City are the overwhelming favourites. I think if they are fit and ready, and they've proved already this season that they are the best English club by quite a long way. And I think with Chelsea, they've certainly improved under Tuchel. They are defensively more sound, but it would take an incredible effort for them to beat this generational team like Manchester City, who can really turn it on and score goals at will. They are without doubt the favourites.
If you actually look into Manchester City, yes, I think their gelling capacity is pretty much strong and solid for now. And it would, I think, Chelsea would definitely need more than a wonder, because we do understand that, Thomas Tuchel's entry and, leading them surely has improved their performance as a team. But it's just going to be the matter of, hope, I guess. I'm sure they're definitely hopeful, because I've been going through a few articles about them, how they're still, out there, they have their minds clear. But then we talk about Manchester City, though it becomes very tricky on deciding how exactly or how powerful this match would be.
Yes, and it really just depends on really which Manchester City turn up. This is what I've said previously. I think Chelsea have done well to recover this year and to get themselves back into the Champions League conversation, and to get to a Champions League final itself is a fantastic achievement. However, we saw with Chelsea in the FA Cup final, they're still probably not as good as Leicester City in many ways. Leicester City are probably a better team as it stands. So you're having a team that you might say is inferior going into the Champions League final, playing the Premier League champions, who have been fantastic now for 12 months and have very much, have been chasing the Champions League trophy now for several seasons. This is their goal, this is their dream, and you would expect them to fulfill it with the way that everything stands at the moment.
And as you mentioned, the FA Cup final, yes, that was one disappointment, for the fact that I think this would surely bring their morale even more down, because losing against Leicester City gives them the edge, or makes them give them the understanding that, how difficult the situation can be in the Champions League final.
Yes, and I think it also just shows at the end of the season that other clubs have other priorities. So Chelsea didn't look particularly motivated in the cup final. They look like they're ready for the last two games of the season, which are very important to them. And of course, the Champions League final. We've just talked about Manchester United and Liverpool. It's the same scenario. Manchester United are looking towards a European final in their last couple of games of the season. The Liverpool match for them, certainly much more important for the Anfield team than it was for the Red Devils. So this is the kind of way that the end of the season normally pans out. You see some strange results, but it's generally because managers are holding their cards close to their chest.
Right. Well, thank you so much, Rob, for being a part of the show and discussing the world of football with us.
Many thanks.
So that was Rob, and yes, he did give a lot of in-depth analysis in terms of Premier League and the Champions League, how things are developing. And yes, talking about the FA Cup, Chelsea managing to lose against Leicester City will surely bring them down. But yes, we're so excited to see that Champions League final, which is now scheduled to happen in Portugal. Anyways, guys, what we'll do is we'll take a quick break, and once we come back from the break, we'll discuss more world of sports with you. See you guys after the break. And yes, welcome back from the break. And yes, before the break, we were discussing the world of football. Obviously, we talked about Champions League and Premier League, how things are actually evolving. But not to forget that we always talk about different sorts of sports. And now we would want to discuss more on the world of golf. And we have with us our national golfer, Umar Kokar, with us in the studio. Umar, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
So, Umar, we'll start off with the interesting victory. K.H. Lee, as we were talking and we were discussing, he just won the first title of his career, being ranked as 137th, player. How do you see that development for him? Because winning AT&T Bryson Nelson's championship and being at 137 and making his mark as a champion, being obviously he's not won this before, and he's from South Korea. what impact would it give to him in the long run for this?
Well, with this win, KH Lee is now exempt for next 2 years to play on the PGA Tour. Okay. And he has also qualified to play in the PG Championship, which is happening next week, which is a major championship. And this was his 86th start. Okay. And with this win, he is going to be playing PG Tour for next 2 years. Otherwise, it's very tough to maintain the PG Tour card if you're not winning or if you do not qualify in the FedEx rank by the end of the season.
But interestingly, if you note, a lot of change of events in terms of golf this year has been, if we talk, even if we talk about Hideki to begin with, obviously he won the Masters. So I think there's some major upgrades and updates in terms of players' learnings. So how much this impact, not only to his victory, of course, is going to affect him, but if we talk about his close competitions who were in this tournament. So what impact is going to be for them, according to, in terms of golf? Because it would have been a very close competition with them in terms of his victory against them.
Yeah, it was a very mixed field trying to win this Byron Nelson Championship. We had multiple players, Sam Burns, Jordan Spieth was in the mix as well. Then Charles, then Daniel Berger had a good last round. So I think the Asian golfers are gradually improving themselves, as we saw Hideki winning the Masters, and now we see, I think it's something that is really motivating them, that if Hideki can get it done, then why not me?
Absolutely, and I think 2021, besides the major upsets in terms of obviously Corona situation and obviously golf events, obviously most of the events have actually moved forward in terms of golf, if I'm not wrong. Even though things have slightly been improving, because it's not a contact sport. If it were a contact sport, thing would be different in terms of if you talk about football or any other sport. But I still think slowly and gradually, it's major development in terms of the Asian players to make their mark. So how do you see and what do you see that how impactful this victory will be for KH Lee in terms of the PGA Championship that's scheduled for next week?
Well, the first thing, that tournament was not on his schedule. So now it's on his schedule. Now all of a sudden he is thinking about playing that tournament. So definitely that's a big motivation for any golfer to win, and obviously to win among all the field. That's a big deal for him. I think he would try to give his best in the coming week.
And what about obviously those in the mix? How much impact would it be for them? Because I'm sure they would want to perform more. Big names were there in this tournament. Now the big names will also be there in that tournament for the PGA, and now it's on his schedule as well. So I think it's going to be a very tricky situation for big names as well in the PGA Championship.
Yeah, definitely. Major tournament is always a very tough tournament for all the major golfers, because all of them are waiting for the Major Golf Championship, and there are few guys, those who did not play few tournaments as well because they were preparing for it. So it is going to be a very fun week for all the golfers all around the world. Because every Major Golf Championship is huge. And
in terms of PGA Championship, this time we were discussing rangefinder, a technical aspect of golf. As we were discussing, it has its pros and it has its cons. Obviously, in terms of you being the golfer, you can probably put in more in-depth analysis on, is it supposed to be out there in terms of the golfers using that rangefinder or not? I mean, what's your take on that?
Well, yeah, for the first time in PGA Tour or in any major golf championship, they have actually allowed the rangefinder. Rangefinder is a device by which you get to know the distance. If that's 150 yards away, 300 yards away, 250 yards away, it's like a laser electronic device, and you put it on the flag and you get the exact distance. So a lot of people are in favor of this because this really helps them to pace up the play. Because average golf round takes around 4 to 5 hours. So they're trying it out, maybe they can improve that time. But a lot of golfers are not in favor of that because they're not only interested in getting to know the distance to the flag, they also want to know how far is the hazard, how far is the bunker, or the front green or the back green. Because for players like them, the golf is mostly about the misses. They're not going to hit perfect shot every time. So they really want to know how far are the other distances as well.
So the job of the KD, obviously KD is like how is the KD going to be affected after this? Because obviously it's all about calculations, right?
Yeah, I think all the KDs would be very pissed off and angry about that because they get a good percentage amount and they're basically responsible for the distances.
So we're using it for the first time. So it's still under. I mean, is it confirmed that they're allowing it?
Yeah. It's pretty much confirmed they're allowing it, and now it's up to the players if anybody wants to use it or they want to use the traditional booklet and the rangefinder as well.
Like if you just said that one round takes around 4 to 5 hours. Yeah. For instance, if all the players eventually start using this device, so how much time would it cut down from 4 to 5 hours? One round for like 4 to 5 hours.
I don't think so. There's going to be any difference because the golfers, those who are playing at that level, they're already playing very fast.
Right.
Because I don't think so that's going to be a big difference. But that's something, electronic device being involved in a game. And obviously, as every sport is becoming data-driven and technology-driven.
Right.
So in that sense, it's a good thing because that electronic device will open a lot of new avenues for the golfers and other data things.
Interesting. Talking about, obviously, the last champion here was obviously Rory McIlroy with Untitled. And he managed to win the last championship, obviously Wells Fargo championship.
Yeah.
So what's your take? Because I'm sure he right now is also on fire, and with his experience, with his wisdom, with his, specifically in terms of his victory, I think he surely would have a bigger edge in terms of performance.
Well, definitely. He recently changed his coach, and he recently had few sessions with a very popular sports psychologist, Bob Rotella.
Right.
And Bob Rotella is an old psychologist, American guy, who has even worked with LeBron James. Young athlete like LeBron James, and all of a sudden he won a tournament, and the tournament which he won at the Wells Fargo was a low-scoring tournament.
Right.
So in the majors, we usually see low-scoring tournaments. And he did not play it this week because I'm pretty sure he's getting
trying to prepare. Yeah, he's getting ready, all prepared
he's
for
getting ready
the bigger
for the
one.
PGA Championship. And let's see. Then again, Jordan Spieth is in good form, and that's his chance to complete his career Grand Slam, as he has already won 3 other major golf championships. But there's his chance to win a PGA Championship, and he finished top 10 in this week.
Right.
When KH Lee won, and in the interview, he was saying that I knew I'm not going to win this tournament, so I started thinking about the next week already.
Interesting. And he definitely does have Rory definitely has the edge in terms of winning there, but that was in 2012.
Yeah.
And not to forget that weather changes, and these days because of the corona situation, the events have slightly gone further. So when it moves further ahead, and when we talk about the weather, because I think weather surely plays a very impactful situation. If there's a lot of mist, if there's not a lot of mist, if there's a lot of wind.
Yeah.
So I think it would surely be a very different island for him this time to play this tournament.
Yeah, definitely. It's always a new challenge, and just to win a major championship, everybody's very nervous. Even Hideki, once he saw the highlights of the tournament back in Japan, he said in an interview that while watching that, I got anxiety and I got nervousness.
Interesting.
This is exactly the same way. So it's definitely going to be a challenge for Rory McIlroy, but if he's leading, then he knows that he can get it done because he had already won on the same course and the same championship.
Well, let's hope all goes well. Umar, thank you very much for being a part of the show and discussing the world of golf. I'll just finish up a few more news. Thanks once again.
Thank you so much.
Anyway, so that was the world of golf, and not to forget that it's going to be super interesting. Rory will surely be looking forward on doing that or earning that victory, but let's hope all things go well for all the players out there. I'll quickly jump over to a quick insight on the world of MotoGP. Yes, we're talking about Australia's Miller, who actually manages to conquer in the rain. Yes, he managed to win French MotoGP while it was raining. So it was a it's definitely very hard when it comes to MotoGP because they're 2 wheels, they're not 4. Even if it's 4, definitely that's the F1 side, and that also becomes technically very hard. But he won it for the second time. It's his second consecutive victory after the Spanish Grand Prix, and obviously in the windy condition of on the circuit for 4.2 kilometer circuit, it was surely very hard. But yet again, he definitely has the edge. Once he's won the Spanish one, now he's won the French one, so he surely has that edge. This was from the world of MotoGP. I'll give you a quick update in terms of the world of NBA. Yes, Warriors beating the Grizzlies 113 to 101, and now they've eventually managed to take the 8th spot on the Western Conference. Steph Curry, obviously a game high of 46 points. He surely is struggling. He surely is trying to keep the Warriors up as long as they can. And Curry has been playing his best basketball consecutively for the 12th NBA season. And Curry averaged 32 points during his second 2,000-point season. But anyways, guys, this was pretty much it from the world of sports. Want to reach out to us, you can on a social media handle, which is @IndusNewsSports. That basically works both for Twitter and for Instagram. Till then, take good care of yourself, and bye-bye.